So Worldbreaker Hulk is back and he is out for war, but this isn't just rage-fueled Hulk smashing. This one's wrapped up in a cosmic, intergalactic conflict involving the Kree, Skrulls, Wakandans, and more, all with a layer of personal vengeance that makes it absolutely fire. Now, this here is the first issue of a newer series from Jonathan Hickman called Imperial. And we open up here on a mysterious, futuristic underwater vessel where two unnamed characters are playing a complex alien board game. And they start off here by saying, "Shall we begin? Or are you having second thoughts? After all, there's no shame in being afraid. What we are wagering is no small sum, and the cost, if you should lose, just might lead to the end of you and yours." Now, the other guy replies back and says, "You might be right, and you probably are, but I just couldn't live with myself if I didn't try." So in reply, the other person says, "Good. Too many these days are too afraid to gamble. Living well is not simply existing, but a life where everything is on the line." And then the question is asked, "Do you know this game?" To which they reply, "I'm sorry, I don't." And they say, "Charade is a wonderful game, pure strategy, much like the Shi'ar context of the Threat or Chameleon Dance of Light. But unlike those, this one is asymmetrical and increases in complexity with every adversary represented. Do you see? When the game starts, you do not know if you are playing against one opponent or many." To which the other person replies and says, "Which I suppose makes it the perfect reflection, a pure representation of the game you and I are about to play." To which the other person says, "It does. And are you ready to begin?" And they say, "Yes. Yes, indeed, very much so. I have to tell you, I'm quite eager to see your opening moves." And then the words are said, "Oh, the first act of this game is always the same. Someone has to die." So from there, we shift focus to Ameda's Cho, aka Braun, Jennifer Walters, aka She-Hulk, and Bruce Banner, aka the Hulk. And they're currently aboard an alien transport vessel right now, heading to Sakaar and Nevo. Now, the reason is because Bruce's son, Hiro-Kala, has just been found dead there, and they're en route for his ceremonial rites. But this isn't just a funeral, it's also an investigation, because there's some clear foul play involved, but we'll get to that in a second. Now, much like Sakaar and Evo is a terrible place. The narration tells us here that Sakaar and Evo, if there is one bright shining center of the universe, this is the planet farthest from it. Sakaar and Evo, like its predecessor Sakaar, is a war planet, an arena of death, a place where only the strong survive. And then we get this absolute fire moment right here, because we see all three, Braun, She-Hulk, and Hulk, fully hulked out in this moment. And I gotta say, shout out to the artist and the colorist team here, Federico Vincentini, Iban Coelho, and Federico Blee. Immaculate job here, phenomenal. And yes, we also now have the return here of Worldbreaker Hulk. Now they're here on Sakaar with a god. Now the god's name is Consul, and when Hulk asks him the question, "The world is on fire, what is happening here?" he responds back by saying, "I do not know, my lord. I am connected to the world net, but there is much confusion. All I know for sure is that this is not how things should be." And then he continues on. He's like, "The city is rioting in chaos when it should be in mourning for our fallen king." Because as it's explained right here, when a triumphant warrior regent dies on Sakaar and Evo, there was always a ceremonial funeral followed by a mourning period of some length. And it's only after that when the Dominion Games of Ascendancy can begin. But instead, that's all happening right now in this moment. So when Jennifer Walters asks a question, she's like, "Do you think that we may have missed the funeral?" One person comes out of nowhere and is like, "Well, what you missed? What we all missed was ever having a true warrior for a king. Instead, all we had was the failed and the fallen Hiro-Kala, which of course you know already gonna piss off Hulk." So Consul tries to step in and is like, "How dare you say these words? I name you a liar, and I would die before I believe what you say. So dude's like, all right, very well then. And dude just cuts Console right in half. But Console, homeboy will be all right. You'll see that later on. Because we shift back to this guy, and he's cocky with it right now. And he's talking right now with Console's body split open on the floor, and he points his sword to the Hulks, and he's like, and do you guys have any words that you wish to speak regarding Hiro-Kala? So you know, Worldbreaker Hulk is like, nah, no words. And then he starts beating the brakes off of this dude. And he even graces us with this moment here where Worldbreaker Hulk jumps up into the sky, just giving me nostalgia moments here of Ragnarok, and comes down and completely obliterates my dude on the ground. Sorry, I had to say obliterate. And then in that moment, Worldbreaker Hulk is like, and do you have any words for me? And the dude's just like, mercy, please. To which Worldbreaker Hulk is like, wrong planet, my guy. And they just start going to town on him and anybody else who would get in their way. But the additional thing here is that Worldbreaker Hulk is like, yo, what is going on here? Have I been gone so long that my name has been forgotten? Do you not know who I am? But it's in that moment where everybody around starts screaming, Worldbreaker, Worldbreaker, Worldbreaker. But what Hulk wants to know, he's like, what happened here? Why has the peace of Hiro-Kala's passing been breached? And it's in this moment here where someone mentions, they're like, well, Hiro-Kala died. No one know how. Mystery. So Galactic Council sends scientists to see the body. Now, if you're wondering who the Galactic Council is that they're referring to here, in Marvel, it's essentially the cosmic version here of the UN, which is made up of the largest empires in the universe here. The Kree, Shi'ar, Skrulls, Nova, and more, as you'll see as we go throughout this comic. And what they do basically is that they team up when there's a galaxy-wide threat. Think about like Thanos, the Builders, Brood, things like that, to try to maintain order and chaos in space. So when the council sends scientists to Sakaar and Evo, you gotta think right now that's a pretty big deal. Which is why after Braun finishes up patching up Console, this is when Console says this. And he mentions here, he's like, the forensic team the Galactic Council sent discovered that Hiro-Kala did not die of natural causes. It appears as if though he was poisoned, murdered. And because this is Holy Sakaar and Evo, being murdered is the same as being defeated. And being defeated means that he could no longer be the rightful ruler of this testing world. All his political marriages were immediately annulled, and now the former wives of Hiro-Kala and their families vie for the throne, which is the reason why there's no peace right now, along with every other true bloodborne son and daughter of Sakaar, of course. So then naturally, what Worldbreaker Hulk wants to do right now is that he wants to go see these scientists that are currently inside because he wants some answers. When he gets inside, this is when he finds out, because one of them says, yes, we're quite sure the blood always tells the story. It was poison. Well, specifically poisons. The compound would be difficult for anyone to detect given the faint traces remaining in the victim's blood. But after a thorough examination and due to our generational expertise, it appears to us now that it was not one, but two poisons working in tandem. I believe that one of the poisons was highly adaptable to the host, constantly changing to overcome the hardiness of the victim. And once a weakness was found, the second poison became active, powerful, direct, and unyielding. Then after reaching critical lethality, and the host was irrevocably terminal, both became inert and began to decay. But the thing is that they know the diagnosis, but they do not know the poison. Now, Cho asks this question. He's like, well, the work seems highly specialized, I'd guess, right? To which one of the scientists responds back and is like, our forensic hive is many minds. We are the foremost in our field inside the collective that is the Galactic Council. We are a specific cure for the most difficult cases. So Cho wants to know, he's like, so how did you know to come here and to check then? What was it that caught your eye? Which is when the scientist says, we knew what we were looking for, and then continues to say, it's because in the last 2 weeks, this is the fourth leader of a union world to have been murdered in this exact same manner. Whether it be a sovereign, tyrant or head of state, someone is killing their leaders. So then later on, after all this, we actually head to the funeral ceremony for Hiro-Kala. And during the ceremony here, Bruce turns over to Jennifer and asks for her to stay there in Sakaar, because what he wants to do is that he plans to head out with Amadeus Cho to speak directly here to the Galactic Council. Now, the reason why is because he wants to find out where the poison came from. So he tells her that they'll return here in 5 days, because as of right now, he has declared that those 5 days will be the mourning period here for Hiro-Kala's death. But here is the kicker, because it was stated right here that before he heads out, that the Hulk would not return in those 5 days, and we will find out why. Now, in this next moment here, we jump over to this place called the Fulcrum City Station, and this right here is the Galactic Council's hub. Now, it is stated here that the primary construction of the Galactic Council's interstellar hub was completed 2 cycles ago, which I'm not exactly sure of the standard time units that are being used here. 2 cycles could mean 2 years ago, so I'm not entirely sure like time frame. So if you know, leave it down below in the comments, but let's continue on. It says that the project immediately proceeded into a secondary phase 2 expansion, which is currently underway. When it first came online, the publicly stated purpose of the hub was to provide a central nexus for both intergalactic travel and trade between council territories. However, some believe the true reason for its existence is the formation of a centralized political power structure and an origin point for what is suspected to be a formalized union of the Galactic Council systems. All council members have denied, of course, such rumors. Now, the first person that we find here is Jason, the ex-ruler of the Spartax and father of Peter Quill, and next to him we see Peter himself. But then we also see a Galactic Council scientist, and they are currently right now looking over the body of Empress Victoria, Jason's daughter. Now, she currently right now is in a cryostasis after also being infected by the same poison. And unfortunately, the scientist explains that they cannot create a cure because they don't even know the origin of the toxin. That the best that they can do right now is wait for the other medics of the hive to arrive, but that really there is very little hope for her. The scientist lets him know that when the hive has returned, that they'll do their best to try to save her, but he also tells them not to hold out much hope, and how they got lucky that the poison became active when she was there receiving her annual royal evaluation. So in this moment, what happens is that Jason decides to reclaim his position as emperor. And Peter kind of smirks a little bit at this here because he was like, you kind of did this a little quickly, or as he says, emperor, never let a crisis go to waste, huh? But the way that Jason sees it is that it's a very delicate time and that the Spartoi need a leader. Now, there's another issue here that Jason wants to discuss because he mentions, he's like, if Victoria dies, she becomes the 4th leader in the Galactic Council to have died so far, right before the largest council meeting in cycles. And the thing about it is that this meeting is meant to decide the sovereignty, treaties, and laws for what is next for the next several years. So he's like, this is not just a coincidence. But Jason's other concern here is that once the full council assembles, that things could get political, and that would be beyond Spartoi control. So what he needs right now is that he needs someone who can operate outside of the system, which is where Star-Lord comes in, but not in the way that Star-Lord thinks. Because he says to him, he's like, no, son, mavericks like you are fine when it comes to gunfights and gambling. What I need is someone with an acute sense of law and order. And more than that, a mind for solving crimes. So now, meanwhile, Brawn and Hulk, they land in Fulcrum to speak with the man in charge, which of course would be Jason. But Star-Lord, he descends down here into the underbelly of Fulcrum to meet just the man that they need. And that is none other than Richard Rider, aka Nova, who has been off the grid for quite some time now. And even Richard says here, he's like, I'm one of the last 2 Novas in the universe. And here we get a little bit of an explanation because it mentions that the planet Xandar, home of the fabled Nova Corps, was destroyed in the annihilation wave of 18,920 GVD. Now, all that remains of the Xandarian culture are the 2 remaining Novas and the long dormant world mind of that society. And I'm assuming that the other Nova that they're talking about here is Sam Alexander. So moving on. Peter and Richard here, they kind of trade some classic banter, going back and forth, even joking that Peter should probably be up on that bounty wall himself right now where they are. But then Richard bluntly asks a question. He's like, Peter, why are you here? But before we get that answer, we cut back to Jason, who is now currently speaking here with Gladiator of the Shi'ar, and then one of the leaders here of the Chameleons. And I'm sorry here, it is unclear exactly who this is. But their concern right now is that the council session is about to begin and everyone has arrived. Even the Kree and the Skrull, they just arrived there as well, except for one. And that nation here was the Wakandans. So when Jason asks Gladiator why, Gladiator replies back and says, their current position clearly stated and intractable is that they are comfortable with their existing treaties and see no reason to insult what alliances they have by breaking any contracts or informal agreements. To which, of course, Jason responds back and is like, well, damn. Like, we cannot mass produce the latest generation of Stargates without their vibranium, and we cannot afford the volume of vibranium we need to seed those Stargates throughout the universe at their current price, which of course, now we understand why the Wakandans were included in this, right? Because at first I was like, well, this is pretty cosmic, intergalactic galaxies here. Why are we including the Wakandans? But listen, I could be wrong. Now, the leader of the Chameleon says, he's like, these are the facts that they are well aware of as well. So in realizing this, Jason is like, all right, so are they playing for power or wealth is the question. But before they can really continue that conversation, we see that Amedas Cho and Hulk have now arrived here and they're waiting to talk specifically here to Jason. So Jason comes out and he's like, okay, ambassadors, how can I help you here? And this is where Hulk is like, listen, a series of murders have been committed. My son was among them, and I want to know what it is that you know. To which Jason is like, I know that my daughter is lying in stasis, dying, and in possibly slow death, and soon to join the other victims. Beyond that, nothing has been confirmed. As soon as it is, I will let you know, and everyone else know as well. But until that time, as the only representatives of your planet on this nation, I would like to invite you to sit in on our Galactic Council meeting so that you can see what's ahead for the universe and all the worlds that she contains. And then he goes on to say, listen, I'm also sorry about your son. It's an evil thing that's happened, and whoever did it must pay. But it's in this moment here where Hulk really talks a little bit more about what's been burning him, as he says, he hated me. So Jason's like, what you talking about? So Hulk is like, he hated me. The circumstances don't matter. All that does is that I failed him in some way. And now I will never be able to fix it. Of a life full of regrets and unforgivable sins, this might be my worst. But then we see that look in Worldbreaker Hulk's eyes as he says, do you have any idea how angry that makes me? But before that could even continue, we switch back over here to Star-Lord and Nova. And Peter is here enjoying some gambling and what he calls some harmless fun here, as he's looking at some old Imperial Guard competition with a group called the War Stars. And Peter starts going here into this long soliloquy about how the War Stars used to be a pretty big deal in the Imperial Guard, how they got decommissioned for super guardians than mammoths that were better. And being that they didn't know anything better, they did what they were pretty much basically created to do. And that was to fight and to beat the crap out of each other in what is called the War Star Arena. And now for their entertainment, they get to watch and see them break each other down over and over again until one day when the good Magistrate smiles favorably upon them and they will be recalled into service and have their honor restored. And Richard Rider, picking up on what Peter is trying to put down, is like, okay, because everyone needs a purpose, right? To which, of course, Peter says, yes, just like unsolved crimes need solving. It's too bad that you're out of work. Which is, of course, when Nova's like, I'm not out of work, I am retired. But then Peter's like, so you're bored? And he's like, yeah, a bit. So he's like, whoa, I got some news for you. To which Richard's like, let me guess, you want to offer me a job? But then he mentioned something that was a complete no-go. He's like, yeah, my father requested the best and he's willing to foot the bill. So Richard is like, Oh, hell no. And the reason being is because if there's anyone else that I would not want to work with, it's your father, who is a power-hungry aristocrat. And even though Peter's a criminal, that right there is a different type of criminal. And more often than not, that's worse. So with that, Peter's like, all right, my father will be disappointed, but just so you know, the offer still stands. But then finally here, we get to this big moment. Well, the big moment before the big moment. We'll talk about that because we finally get all the hive of the galactic scientists to return. And they all break the news again that barring any sort of miracle, that Empress Victoria is not going to be able to be saved. And unfortunately, while she can remain in stasis indefinitely, the deed is done. And all that is left is just waiting. She is going to die by the same poisons as the rest. But here is the kicker, because they say we are also confident in one other thing. And that one other thing is that they know exactly who made the poisons. So in this next moment here, we pick up on Emperor Jason getting ready to make an address here to the entire Galactic Council, because now it is the big day. And he starts off by saying, I regret this, I truly do. It was my hope that this meeting would be about trade and treaties and other matters that predominantly concern the bringing together of our empires. But that will have to wait, because there can be no union when there are people in this room who seek the deaths of those who sit beside them. There has been a murder done, regicide, and it was one of you. Now everybody's looking around like, yeah, what this dude talking about? But then he continues on, he's like, my daughter, the Sicarian king, the throne guardian of the empty Orion chair, and the last witch of Zartan deviants, all of them killed by the exact same poisons. And this was confirmed by the medical hive of this council. One of the poisons is highly mutable and adaptive. The other incredibly direct and aggressive, like the races that they come from. And then he specifically names who. He says the Skrull and the Kree. So Teddy's looking at this dude like, what are you talking about, bro? And he continues to tell him, he's like, it's true, Emperor Doric, the origin of these acts leads back to you. And please, for such simultaneous incidents across 4 desperate empires, don't try to blame us on dissidents or rebels. This took planning and means. At the least, it took a government. At the worst, a throne. And now at this point, Teddy's pissed off. He's like, yo, what? You can see the look on his face. Now, one of the chameleons here is yelling out, arrest him all. But Teddy's like, no, like, I wouldn't do anything like this. And then he starts to question Clark. He's like, yo, do you know anything about this? And he's like, nah, I don't know anything about this at all. But then one comes in and says, well, if it was not the Skrull faction and not the Blue Kree, then it must be. But then someone interrupts and says, actually, your majesty, it was us. So Teddy's like, what? And then he explains, he's like, the Kree/Skrull Ministry of Science was contracted to create a compound toxin. So we did. This is what we do, make weapons of war. But we did not use it. We simply delivered it. So Jason and Hulk is like, to who? And he's like, other parties of the council. But we did, and before he could even finish, here comes a bullet straight through the dome. So everyone's like, sniper, and they try to get down. But then here comes these other bullets that are coming in at the same time as well. And the thing about this is that they're using gravity compound bullets. And one of those bullets hits Jason, and Quill's like, no. Now Cho was able to find out where the sniper was shooting from. And he tells Worldbreaker Hulk. So Worldbreaker Hulk, he jumps up and he tries to go after him. And when he gets there, he sees that it was Wakandan. So I guess they did show up to the meeting. So Hulk is trying to go after him. But the Wakandan causes a bomb to go off, or at least an explosion to go off, which knocks a lot of the other members that were there at the council. So now this creates a whole other problem. And the Wakanda tries to jump on the space bike, yeah, right, and tries to get away. And Hulk is gonna try to go after him. But someone comes in and tells him, it's like the Stargates are already being locked down. The assassins not getting out of the system. But please help us save who we can. And I believe that this character's name here is Gala. And here's where we find out that 12 more are dead. And 3 more of them were heads of state. And more than twice that number is currently missing. Rescue droids are combing the area outside the station. And amongst those missing is Emperor Doric, Teddy, and his consort remain among the missing. And Killar continues, he's like, what happened here today will echo through our empire. The center may not hold. But Quill wants to know, he's like, what about the others? And he lets him know, he's like, the great war machine is forming. Ronan has summoned the accusers. Most of the Shi'ar Imperial Guard is en route, along with a sizable amount of the royal fleet. The same goes for most of the others. Deathbird has called for an audience. Everyone is gathering. And that is when Quill takes the ring off his father. And it's in that moment here where we finally get to see Nova come to the party. And he mentions to Peter, it's like, I heard about what happened and I would like to help, and how he's sorry about all of this. But the one thing that Peter wants to know, he's like, will you help me catch the people who did this? To which he says, that I can do. Now, an hour later after this, we hear Deathbird saying that we should begin. And Peter wants to know, he's like, do you know who did this? To which Ronan says, I have evidence in my hands and judgment in my heart. All an accuser needs to sleep soundly at night. Well, very well. The Council medics removed the ballistics from the victims' bodies and scoured station security footage of the attacker, while the accusers on New Hala were able to do a rapid analysis of who paid the science minister for the poisons. 2 streams of data that flow into a roaring river of guilt. And in the middle of this being said, we jump back here to our 2 unnamed individuals that started us all off here. And one says, and so it comes to this. An inflection point, when all eyes turn and shadows rise to reveal the real enemy. Oh, I do love surprises, as I love the great game and the pieces who play it well. And then we jump back here to Ronan, who says, the accusers traced the payments bank to the banking houses of Wakanda Prime, and the bullets we took from the bodies were made of vibranium, fired by an agent of that empire. So Peter asks a question, he's like, what do we do now? To which Deathbird says, there is blood on our feathers and the bitter taste of betrayal in our mouths. It will not go unanswered. There is only one thing that can follow. And Worldbreaker Hulk finishes it off by saying, war. So a little bit of brawn, pun intended, a little bit of fury here, guys, and a little bit of detective work going on right now. What are your thoughts here on this first initial issue? Of course, we're definitely going to be covering this series here. Jonathan Hickman, once again, you got me. Don't forget to leave a like on this video here for the YouTube algorithm. Also, subscribe if you're brand new to the channel. Also, down below, there's a link to our Keepin It comic website here where you can take a look at our merch that we have. That is one way that you can also support the channel as well, is by taking a look at our merch, see what you can grab. We appreciate you watching. And as always, thank you so much for kicking it with Keepin It Comic. Bye.